You everybody for coming to the Aaron Torres podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen, go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. But what is also a big story, especially for this audience, is what the heck is Jim Harbaugh going to do next? The man climbed the mountaintop at Michigan, and it feels as though, by all accounts, he is going to move on from Michigan to the NFL, and he still very much may. But we got a very interesting report on Tuesday morning that indicates that he might actually come back to Michigan under one very unique circumstance. Let's start with the NFL update, though. And the NFL update from Jim Harbaugh is that, in the least surprising news ever, on Monday, he did interview with the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, what's funny about this? That isn't a rumor. That isn't speculation. It isn't, whispers from Adam Schefter. No. In the NFL, I love this, by the way. NFL teams actually tweet out who they interview on any given day. So we found out on Monday that Bill Belichick interviewed with the Atlanta Falcons. We found out on Monday that Jim Harbaugh interviewed with the Los Angeles Chargers. So while college football, we track planes and we try to figure out who's going where and under the coat of darkness, what does it all mean? In the NFL, it's just like, yeah, John Smith was in the building. Not really our guy, but we had him in here anyway. It is so funny how it works, but that did go down on Monday. It is worth noting, by the way, Chargers tweeted out another interview on Tuesday, so it doesn't feel like they are at the finish line. But I kind of called around on the Harbaugh Charger stuff, and I don't think I really have any new or interesting information other than stuff that you already know. One, I do think that if Jim Harbaugh does leave for the NFL, I do still feel like the Chargers are the leader in the clubhouse. Now, that could change based on the jobs that could become available. Could the Dallas Cowboys fire Mike McCarthy? As I record, that has not happened. I think it should. Don't know if it will. Will the Philadelphia Eagles, after the debacle of Monday night against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, will they fire Nick Sirianni? As I record, that has not happened yet. Does not mean that it won't. But right now, this is the job that, if everything goes well for Harbaugh, this is the one that he wants. He has ties to the Los Angeles Chargers organization from the time that they were in San Diego. And obviously, look, the NFL is a quarterback-driven league. And Justin Herbert, I think we all think, is one of the best quarterbacks in that league. Now, we don't know because he's had Anthony Lynn and Brandon Staley as a head coach, but I bring it up because this is the one that Harbaugh has kind of had circled, and now we kind of wait to see what happens next. One, there's the Harbaugh element of it, which we'll talk about in a minute. But even from the Chargers' perspective, it appears as though there's no stone left unturned. They're doing a bunch of interviews. I heard they did like 4 or 5 before Harbaugh. As I said, they tweeted out another interview on Tuesday. Let me see if I can find that really quick as to who they actually interviewed. But they're going through their due diligence, and they should. There's nothing wrong with that. I have no problem with them trying to figure out who their next head coach is. Let's see who they tweeted out. They tweeted out that they have completed an interview with Brian Callahan as the head coach. Brian Callahan, by the way, let's see what you need to know about him. He is the offensive coordinator in Cincinnati. So what do you know about that? Another coordinator, whatever, blah, 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 blah. It is worth noting the Chargers are also looking for a GM. And so I think that's where the holdup is you want to hire the GM before you hire the head coach. And so you're trying to do that concurrently. And I think for Harbaugh, all the questions that we've had about the Chargers are all of the ones that we're going to have going forward. One, are they going to pay him like he is an elite upper tier head coach? We know he has a contract on his desk for $11.5 million per year at Michigan to make him the highest paid coach in college football. So are the Chargers going to pony up? This was a team that was paying Brandon Staley $4 million a year, meaning that Jim Harbaugh, even if they double his salary, would still have to take a 33% pay cut. They need to go, I would assume, and I'm not Don Yee, I'm not his agent, but my guess is I'm thinking you got to at least match the Michigan Wolverines, and that would mean tripling the salary that you just paid the last head coach. From there, listen, my understanding is Jim Harbaugh wants player personnel control. What does that mean? Does it mean that he helps handpick the GM? I don't know. But again, if he has no say in the players that he's going to coach, I don't know that that job is all that appealing to him. So the salary, what happens with player personnel? Does he get along with the GM? And then finally, I do think the ownership group is important, right? We know about the Spanos family. We know there's a bunch of family members in that front office. Some, the whispers that I've heard over the last couple of weeks, some may be a little bit of a meddling crew, Meddling, like they like to meddle. I think it's Mdedd, whatever. This ain't a spelling bee, okay? I'm like Cardale Jones. I didn't come here to school. I came here to talk college football, okay? So anyway, bottom line is, I've heard the family can be a little bit difficult. Is the salary going to be right? But listen, if it's all about football, all about personnel, the Chargers have the best personnel available. So we'll see what happens from there. We'll also see, again, what happens with other jobs that could open. And then the other one that's intriguing, what do the Raiders do? Do they keep Antonio Pierce? If they go away from Antonio Pierce, I think Mark Davis is going to take a big swing again. And I will say, Harbaugh's kind of got that Raiders feel, the swashbuckling, the Pirates, the this, the that. What's interesting, though, beyond just the interview that he did on Monday, is that we got a very interesting report from Dan Wetzel on Tuesday that basically said the idea of him returning to Michigan is not completely off the table. And what is especially interesting is that Harbaugh, first of all, per Wetzel, as I just said, $11 million, $11.5 million, 5-year contract on his desk right now. Where the holdup is that Jim Harbaugh is seeking a clause in the contract in which he cannot be fired for NCAA rules violations. This is from a Dan Wetzel article on Yahoo. Specifically, sources said Harbaugh is seeking language that would grant him immunity from termination from any finding or sanction that could arise from multiple current NCAA investigations into the program. All right, so let's break it down. Let's explain what's going on, and let me explain what this all means, okay? So it is pretty standard that in all of these coaches' contracts, they can all be terminated if there is some sort of NCAA rules violation for cause. For cause means that you do not have to pay them the full salary, the full buyout, whatever, if they get fired for NCAA rules violations. Now, this is important for one of two reasons. One, it's important, even if you got it going good, if you owe a guy 8 years, $80 million, and you're about to get the sledgehammer from the NCAA, you can get out of that contract pretty easily. But the other thing is, this has been used to get bad coaches out of bad contracts that are disadvantageous to the school. I hate to say it. My alma mater, UConn, after Kevin Ollie won a national championship, about 2 years later, they're losing every game, and the school's got to get out of it. And I'm not accusing anyone of anything. I know the administration there, but I also know what the NCAA violations were that were found on Kevin Ollie. They were pretty minor. But essentially, the school tried to say, hey, minor violations, you're in trouble, you got to go, you're fired without paying you. And then they went to law, there was a lawsuit back and forth, blah, 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 whatever. The point I'm trying to make, this is a pretty standard clause in pretty much every coach's contract. I would assume everybody from like Kirby Smart on down has that clause in their contract. The problem is with Jim Harbaugh is that he is one of the rare guys that both we know the NCAA is coming after, but also sort of has leverage over his employer. So obviously, look, as far as the NCAA is concerned, we know what's going on. We have the two separate investigations into Harbaugh and into Michigan football. That's probably the better way to put it. Not so much Harbaugh. We have the quote unquote cheeseburger gate, extra benefits for recruits. Harbaugh already has served a 3-game self-imposed school suspension. Those were the 3 games to start the year. Why I bring that up, there is also the 3-game, there is also the Connor Stalions investigation. Connor Stalions, of course, the alleged videotaping. It's worth noting that was not a school-imposed 3-game ban to end the regular season. That was actually imposed by the Big Ten, so the NCAA could add stuff on top of it. And so what Jim Harbaugh is basically saying is, like, if I come back and the NCAA comes down on us, I don't want to sign a 5-year contract and in 6 months they give me a 10-game suspension and you can fire me and I have no contract. And so that's why it's interesting, because this is a rare instance where there are probably some sort of NCAA punishment coming almost certainly. But also he has the leverage to say, you ain't going to fire me. I ain't giving up coaching Justin Herbert or going to the NFL or going to the Cowboys or going to the Raiders or going to whoever. I ain't giving up all that to come back. And then you fire me 6 months from now because the NCAA is mad at me about some hamburgers, or the NCAA is mad at me because one of my assistant, video guys went on the road and was taping stuff. And so it's a very interesting standoff. But what I also think, to me, it speaks to is, I credit Jim Harbaugh. The man knows that he has leverage. Okay. And I am far from a negotiating expert. But I have at times had leverage in my favor in certain instances. And one thing about Harbaugh that has been very clear, he is very smart about keeping all his options open. We know that there has been a contract on his desk since like October or November, and he hasn't signed it because he wanted to see what was out there in the NFL. But he's also now keeping it open the opposite direction. If I don't leave for the NFL, I'm only coming back under these circumstances. And essentially, I want it to be basically a perfect setup where I have leverage, I have control. You can't fire me for this, you can't fire me for that, etc. And so you can agree or disagree, but I think it is a very smart negotiating ploy for Jim Harbaugh. If you're coming off even an 8-4 year and the school wants to keep you, but they can't really keep you, then all of a sudden you sit there and say, the school might not agree to it. But the schools kind of got their hands tied because the schools, they don't want to lose Jim Harbaugh. Now, I think understandably they get that it is a possibility and it may happen, but they don't want to lose him. Frankly, what's kind of wild that nobody's talking about with Michigan is, obviously it feels like at this point, Sharon Moore would have to be the replacement, because two guys that felt like legitimate options, Kalen DeBoer and Jed Fish, have both taken other coaching jobs since the season ended. So Jim Harbaugh has all the leverage here, and I think it's just fascinating to think about. I think it's also fascinating to see what's next. Now, if I had to make two guesses as to what this story means, a couple things. One, I believe Michigan's going to put the clause in the contract because, let's be blunt, I think it's obvious. Even if Jim Harbaugh gets a suspension, even if there's scholarship reductions, whatever the punishment would be from the NCAA, Michigan is going to be better off in the long run the longer that Jim Harbaugh is there, as opposed to him leaving in the NFL. And it's not to say Sharon Moore can't be great. It's just to say Michigan is in better shape if this guy ends up coming back. But then there's the flip side as well. I do still think Harbaugh is going to see all of his NFL options, and the options are going to be plentiful. Whether it is the Chargers, whether it is the Raiders, whether it is a job that might not even be open yet. This man, by the way, the Washington Commanders, I still think like that's a rich ownership group that wants to make a splash. Just because Jim Harbaugh hasn't been linked there yet doesn't mean he won't be linked there eventually. So I just bring it up to say, if I had to make two guesses right now based on this piece of news, I think Michigan agrees to that clause, but I don't think it means he comes back. I still think he goes to the NFL. But what is clear, if you're a Michigan fan, if you're holding on, hoping that he comes back, this is about as much as you could ask for. He's using the moment in time to leverage what he wants, but I don't think he'd be going through this whole song and dance if he was 100% out.